Hi, Latinos in Clinical Research. We are here today with Shanna Bruflodt. We're here to speak about, a little bit about her backstory, get to know her a little bit more, so that we think she has a really amazing career and a very interesting uh, work experience. So, Shannon, if you can give us a little bit more information on, your story and how our members can get to know you a little bit more.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. So I think I am one of the typical people that kind of fell into research on accident. And then once you find it, you're like, oh, I'm staying here. So I took a long journey there. So I've been in healthcare for 25 years. I started out working on I wanted to do international business. I then went to nursing. So I worked as a medical assistant through nursing school. I got to my clinicals and decided, wait a minute, I could go to pre-med instead. So I should have finished my clinicals. I didn't. I switched to pre-med. I then relocated to another state, and I got distracted with work. And I also realized I could be an X-ray tech. I got selected for a pilot program in Virginia. And it was one-on-one training for maybe 2 months. And then I went and sat for my certification or my license, and I passed. In our program, there were 10 of us that they were trying this program out. And only one of us got all of the certifications in one try. One other person got half of the certifications the second attempt. So I was rather pleased with myself with the studying, but I did enjoy being an X-ray tech as well. It gave me a different perspective in the healthcare field. I then traveled up and down the coast for a while, and at some point, I graduated with my bachelor's degree. I have a bachelor's in biomedical science from Virginia, Jefferson College of Health Sciences, which is now owned by Radford University. And I realized I applied to one medical school. First off, you don't do that. And when I applied, they'd already filled all their seats that year. And I knew that, I still applied, but I got waitlisted and I felt such relief. I realized that's not what I actually needed to do. I had just been, you're focused on getting something done for so long. It's like, this is no. So I then diverted over to my MBA. And so I got my MBA based off of the physician I was working with at the time was the president of a clinic. Actually, he was the vice president at the time. And he would get frustrated that these students are graduating from executive colleges and then running hospitals and they had no healthcare experience. He's like, wait a minute, that's what you need to do. And so that's how I went back to get my MBA and started managing medical offices. I ended up in North Carolina, and I was overseeing a few offices that had a research component. And so that is how, from a management perspective, I realized this is because in healthcare, reimbursement goes down all the time. You're not increasing funds. So you're constantly looking for an additional revenue stream. And so from a business perspective, I fell into it from revenue. And then I relocated to Georgia, began working with a neurology group who wanted to grow their outpatient and inpatient divisions, as well as their neurology practice. And I kind of began watching the coordinators, and when you're watching it from afar, you're like, that's really cool, and started asking questions. So what did they need to do to be a coordinator? Could I do this? And that's where you start hearing all the stories, how you have a private practice and the coordinator quits, and so whatever medical assistant is around, they're like, hey, you're next, coordinator. So that's how it. So we also have done that in the past. If you run out of staff, I find that is a good, interesting way to get into research. If you go find an office that has research in it, and you go for whatever role you apply for, you qualify for, you network within that practice until there's an opening, and they're usually going to cross-train you, especially if you're a good employee at their office. You can train research, but getting the right attitude and the right motivation is hard to find. So that is one way I encourage people. Find a place. If you can't get in, find a place that has research and sit and wait. Do whatever you need to do. You always volunteer, you help out, you cross-train as much as possible. So I ended up here in Georgia in a neurology group. We streamlined, we separated everything out. At some point we realized the medical practice was less as enjoyable as the research part of the company. So we went ahead and let the medical practice grow, and we let those physicians go start their own and transition to 100% standalone private research center. So all of our volunteers were completely recruited. We had no referring pattern coming in. We then built our recruitment team. We would go to healthcare fairs. We would go to any kind of, we were based in neurology, so we would offer memory screens. It's important to have a baseline memory screen before you think you have problems, so you have a baseline number at some point. Finger check, or, glucose checks, cholesterol checks, different things that people want to know if you're at a health fair or an event, and that gets them to the table. And I think all of us will agree, one-on-one with a potential subject is always the best way to recruit someone. They feel your passion, they feel your excitement, they ask questions, and they get to meet you, and you're not just somebody on the phone. And so we grew that department so that it was continually feeding into the research group. We became a multi-specialty group. It also grew to the point where we were a private equity attraction. So that group was eventually purchased, and then my job was redundant, so my position was eliminated. And so that's how I left that group, and off I went onto other opportunities. So I did have a non-compete for a year, so I spent a year and a little bit over selling digital X-ray equipment because of my X-ray background. But because of COVID, I wasn't a very good salesperson. I'm going to blame it on COVID. Anyways.
That's fair. Everybody does, so that's fair.
For a study, I can, like, Uber and Lyft drivers. I'm serious. You can get some Uber and Lyft drivers into studies, but yeah, selling digital X-ray equipment was a whole different thing. So then I have also consulted with a few medical research centers around Atlanta, and I am now at Morehouse School of Medicine. Very excited to be there. We all have concerns about underrepresented populations in clinical research. And I love being there because I get to be part of several parts of that. One, they're training physicians to go address health equity. Like, that's the whole focus of the school. Like, we are addressing health equity. Then we also have the center, which we've already got a great group of people. And they do a lot of physician-initiated studies. The professors there, if they want to do research, they're finding grants to fund it. Some of them may need assistance. And so that's where the Clinical Research Center within the Morehouse School of Medicine it's housed there. We are the ones who will coordinate it and help them execute it. If the physician-initiated ones will help them, go over their protocol, tweak anything that they need assistance with, help them with their grant funding. And then for the pharmaceutical studies, that is not something they've had a lot of in the past. So one of my main goals is to continue to streamline the processes that are already in place, continue to grow the division, and take on more pharmaceutical studies, because we all know the phase 2s and phase 3s, getting the minority populations in these new drugs is crucial to these drugs also being more representative to everyone and not, everyone. That is how I got to where I am.
It's actually a very interesting story. I like that you have the private industry sponsored experience with Neuro Studies, I believe, and then now with Morehouse. I have a lot of questions actually, but I guess, and we'll get to DE and I as well, I guess, when we talk about Morehouse more. But back to Neuro Studies, just because I'm personally interested. So, and if you can talk about it, what was it specifically, or I guess what number of things was it that attracted the private equity firm to that site or network of sites that you're allowed to speak on? I don't know what you're allowed to talk about.
So several companies approached us, so I can speak on generalities, like what they said, hey, this is why we're coming after you. So one of the things that we specialized in was Alzheimer's research and MCI, mild cognitive impairment, the pre-AD. And In fact, I don't know if you've heard of the Global Alzheimer's platform. And
Yeah, Monica and I did a few studies using that network.
So Neuro Studies was one of the first 11 the first year they opened. The rest of them, with outside of BioClinica, bought another practice down in Florida. I can't think of Dr. Craig's.
Oh yeah. BioClinica did buy several sites actually in Florida. You're right.
So it was Sean Stanton's site, and I can't think of the name, and us that were the non-hospitals that first year, which I point that out because again, we like everyone, they were universities. So how they found the sites is they told us that they had gone to the pharmaceutical companies running the studies and said, if you have an AD study, what 3 sites do you want to conduct it? And then they took those responses and started with the top, and that the first 11 that year, but we were included in that. So the fact that we were thought leaders in the industry and were able to enroll, we were able to meet our numbers when requested. We were even at one study, we were an add-on site, and within 7 weeks, it was only open for 7 weeks, we enrolled almost the most in the entire study, and 90% of them had their lumbar punctures as well. So
was that really, just one site or multiple sites?
That was just one site for that study.
Wow. Okay.
But if we'd have gotten 2, that would have been, yeah. Anyways, so yes, so that we were attractive because we were able to meet goals. We were able to start studies up, quickly if needed.
Was it site physician owned or was it non-physician owned?
Physician owned.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Yeah. Just asking for a friend, Shanna. No biggie. So with Morehouse, like it's very different, obviously, than the situation you left. Can you talk about what's different and how it's different?
So some of the differences I'm still acclimating and understanding myself. As a private site, we didn't do a lot of, well, actually we didn't do any except for one NIH grant or grant funded study, because as a private site, you don't really have a buffer of somebody else, a bigger entity, and it was going to cost us to do it sometimes. So I've really enjoyed being able to be part of these studies that are NIH or NINDS funded that we just couldn't afford to do in the past. So also learning about grants funding has been interesting and fun.
Yeah, you're definitely becoming, if you haven't already, you're becoming, I think, by going to Morehouse, because most people in this industry, they tend to choose either industry studies or academia, and you're doing both. Very few people have both, and I think you are doing, a good job at that. I mean, you're developing your career pretty nicely, able to see both sides of industry and academia. Uh, when did you notice? I know you just joined recently.
5 weeks ago.
Oh, 5 weeks ago. Okay. Was diversity, equality, and inclusion like obvious from the beginning that that's important to Morehouse, or was it just something you've heard just now?
It is obvious. They are an HBCU. I believe they were also, they may be the only, but they were the first Jayco standalone research site HBCU that's Jayco certified.
Wow. So what's the Jayco actually mean for those that don't know?
Joint Commission.
Sorry.
It's like the equivalent of the FDA for hospitals.
Yeah, I come from a healthcare background, like 10 years. So I worked with Jayco accredited, and so I understand like when they go for those audits, they're pretty intense. Yeah.
Wow.
I actually had a question. So when you were going through this process, because you have a lot of education background, how much do you feel that played a part outside of your just your in general experience, work experience? How much that played a part in getting to this level of director?
I think it played a decent part because I had so many different aspects of, like I had the business part, I had the healthcare part, I've worked in the industry for so long. It helped me be able to review protocols. and have minimal questions. Obviously, you still have some. Having the MBA background, I was able to tackle contracts and budgets. I mean, I don't know how about you guys, but it's really fun when an attorney sends you something and you send it back with an error and you're like, oh, you forgot
Oh,
one.
we just had a lunch with one. Chris can tell you all about it.
I have my road stand. Yeah.
Awesome. And I was just curious, like as far as during the beginning periods of your transitioning and like learning how much you enjoyed clinical research compared to what you were initially doing, um, did you do any, just while you're breaking between like education, right? Because you were going back and forth for different degrees. Were you doing any side learning, like side certifications? Were you reaching out to organizations and networking, or it was just kind of as you were going through your one-on-one work that you were, you know, I guess leveling up on your knowledge?
So I really do bounce all over. I also am a certified herbologist.
That's awesome.
Works really well in our industry, right? I happen to be a vegan, so that's how that kind of falls into it. However, I understand science is important and medication advancement and disease advancement is important. So like I understand there's some things I prefer we didn't do, but that's how we get to in human phases.
Mhm.
I also, during this period of time after I left Neuro Studies and I was doing the digital X-ray equipment, I went to Purdue online and Purdue University online and completed my Lean Green Six Sigma, my green,
I
Lean
saw
Green
that. I saw that on the LinkedIn.
belt.
That's for project management, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Funny story. We use a lot of it. All the CRAs, they use a lot of these tools. They're little project managers.
It's the same as the CRCs. They are like project managers in a smaller scale for each study.
Yeah, they're like PMs without the title. I mean, somebody asked me, it's funny because somebody asked me today on Instagram, hey, what does a CRA do that a project manager can't do? And, my answer was something around CRAs don't deal with budgets and planning and logistics, but everything else they did, like everything clinical. But there are some CROs, small biotechs, where there is no difference. Like you, you do both.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. I mean, a lot of your background, including, I mean, I looked into it, I didn't do it, but I wanted to get certified in herbology. I love that stuff. So that's super interesting in your background in medical, and then kind
Yeah.
of jumping into the
We might need to
hospital.
talk. We might need to talk
Yeah.
because we may have we have a small CRO, Chris and myself, and we got approached by a IIT, a doctor out of Las Vegas who wants to do some CBD studies.
Oh, CBD
So we
studies,
may
that's
have to
cool.
talk. Yeah, because we need to talk like IIT. We've done a few IITs before, but we've never developed a protocol uh, for them and all that kind of stuff. So I don't know if you have the time or the experience, Shanna, but we're definitely looking for help.
Yes, and we would be open to doing that kind of study as well at Morehouse.
Oh wow, okay,
Shanna,
good to know.
I have a question in regards to the recruitment because it seems that your techniques or the strategies that you use in your previous organizations were successful. So I would like to hear more about it because obviously that's also one of the most uh, biggest challenges in the industry, and a lot of the clinics or small clinics struggle with that, and we also um, that's one of the things that we're trying to do through Latinos in Clinical Research is educating the population about clinical trials. So tell us about your magic.
It wasn't magic. It didn't happen overnight. I had the great fortune of a colleague, Marla, who had a background in marketing and actually had worked with them, I believe, NBC at some point. And so she had a great marketing background, and we were able to kind of put together a marketing activation plan. So we had the marketing framework from her, and then as we delved into different studies, We would tackle it with grassroots marketing. We would make sure we were listed on any portals that were at no cost. We would decide what portals we wanted to be part of that would benefit us by name recognition. So sometimes you may be spending money on a marketing tool and you're not going to get a lead from it, but it's important to have your name out there for recognition. We would try to do at least, we would set an amount of talks a week. So we would do 4 a month. And if sometimes we would go over and that was fine. We would also do TV ads periodically. And we would, and it's also, it depends on the protocol. Some protocols, there's just certain ways and tactics that are going to get you the patients and you just stick with those. But when you're breaking into a new indication or you've got a new study and it's not working like it had before, now you're starting to do all your layering. We made sure our Facebook page had a lot of followers. I believe there are up to 37,000 followers, to the point where marketing companies, they would be like, we would do our banner ad on our page, but you actually have enough followers, we can do it on yours as well. So we would do it, we would compare, we would do one on theirs and one on ours and compare and see which one worked better. And they were actually about the same. So again, ongoing name recognition, even if it's not bringing in a lead, have it out there. Researchmatch.org is at no cost to institutions. And I asked somebody, like, I don't see us listed. And they're like, well, we didn't have any currently enrolling. Or actually, we had one enrolling, but we weren't getting anything, so we took it down. I'm like, so just so you know, just because it's not bringing you an active lead does not mean it's not working for you. Your name recognition is a big deal also, because say somebody has a question and goes to their primary care doctor. If their primary care doctor has seen your name flashing on the TV and on billboards and heard you on the radio and flyers all the time, they're going to recognize, oh, no, they're legit. They've probably read a little bit about it, versus somebody that they're like, I don't know that person. So you've got to get your grassroots. Obviously, you can use different portals that are specifically for subjects. We've got Subject Well, we have Study Kick, there's Galen Galen Recruitment. I mean, there's a lot of them out there that will work with, like ClinEdge, that will work specifically with sites. You always try to get recruitment money from your sponsor. The other thing that always makes me cringe a little bit is when we're filling out feasibilities. They ask us if we have the database. Obviously, we have the database. Yes, we do. We fill out that data. Then they ask you if you need recruitment because you can't fill the study. You don't need recruitment, but you want recruitment. So I always encourage people, you can put in there, we have the database. However, it always works better. We love central campaigns, but it always works better if we're layering different techniques to round it out and have new people to our database. Also, a lot of times you have studies where they're looking for people not on medication yet. That's not in our database. They're going to be on medicine. They're going to the doctor, like neurologists. By the time they get to the neurologist, they've been on medication. So sometimes you have to, you tell them, yes, I've got the database, but we're going to do better if we're also getting new leads to mix in there. What else can we do? Giveaways. Again, not study specific. If you're building your database and you've got your top of mind IRB approvals for, everything's done appropriately, but you can go to healthcare fairs. And again, just being in front of people and talking, they will sign up to be in your database. It's amazing what people will do for a free pen too.
Yeah. Do you guys use local IRB or central?
Central as much as possible. There were a few things we
Wow.
had. We were doing inpatient studies for a while. So we used a local, it was actually a hybrid, local and central. It was locally central.
So you have experience with the local.
Yes, at Morehouse, we have a Morehouse local IRB. And so if we use the central IRB, we use the central IRB, and then we submit documentation and IRB approval to Morehouse IRB, so they are aware of everything that's going on as well.
Interesting. Wow.
So
Wow.
I've always wondered, Chris and I actually had this conversation because we don't have that much experience with local IRBs. So if in your case with Morehouse, if you're using a central IRB for as many studies as you can, right? If there's a does the local IRB still aware of it? Because you just said you filed something with them. Do they ever disagree on things, and then who wins?
They have not ever disagreed on something. We are very careful on what we proceed on. And they've never proceeded on something that was questionable. I asked.
So,
Okay.
so I am curious. I'd like to follow up with that. So do you, when approached by a sponsor, they have a central IRB, you elect to work with that central IRB, do you still have to run the protocol and such by the local IRB? How does that work?
No, we notify the local IRB that we are submitting it. And then when we receive IRB submission for that study, we then turn that submission to notification into them, and then we renew with them annually.
Okay. All right.
We are notifying them. I mean, obviously, if it was a bad study, they would again, it wouldn't apply because we wouldn't pick a bad study. But yes, if they didn't agree with it, they would say something, but they've been agreeable. So it's more of a notification system and them knowing what's going on.
So we were both right, Chris, on that CRA Academy
Right.
module.
That's exactly why I was asking.
We're both right. It's all good. Let's see. I mean, this conversation can go on forever, but I want to be mindful of your time. I mean, Monica or Ashley, you guys have any other questions?
Yeah, actually, I did have another one. How would you say, I mean, as far as there with Morehouse, did you say that it's sorry, HSBU, correct? Or what did with the HB? HBCU, okay, sorry. And so how do y'all focus very heavily on making sure you have like Spanish translations and things like that when you're dealing with Latinos, right, in clinical research?
So I do not believe we have enough PIs and coordinators to do a study in Spanish. That is a population that I am looking to also increase while I'm there. It's not my first goal, but all the underrepresented populations, we definitely want to be represented.
For sure.
Our focus is the African American Black population, going and discussing any myths about research, talking about historical studies and how things are not the same now, answering questions they may have.
All that stuff, all the good stuff, all the good points that definitely need to be discussed, especially with diversity and inclusion. But that's really good to know. And yeah, we're very well aware that the language barrier in that is super, it's a tough situation. And it's partially also why Latinos in clinical research is really wanting to bring in, like what Dan always says, the grassroots, right? We want to also go to the colleges. We want to make it aware so that we have a bigger following, to where that it's also, students that come out that can be coordinators, that can speak Spanish, that are from rural areas, get them job opportunities in areas that don't have Spanish speaking. And so if, somebody's watching this right now and you know of a student that would be considered for, or would consider clinical research, you make sure you send them this webinar, and so they can get a little educated as far as what Latinos in clinical research can provide in free resources.
Love it if we had a Spanish speaking coordinator at some point, and we are looking to grow. We are hiring.
Awesome. Well, I know we spoke, right? Our website, all you have to do is just go in there and put up whatever job openings y'all have. Our members are always going in there and looking and applying.
We do. We have a mobile unit. I just think that is the most fascinating, amazing thing, so that we can also go to the rural areas.
That's awesome.
Another good example, up until yesterday, when we're no longer currently giving the Johnson & Johnson, but the one we're offering the vaccine on campus, and they're like, we want the one injection. We're like, no, we're using those on the mobile units, so that the rural areas, we just have to hit that area once. So that was, I loved that. We are also recipients of 2.1 million of that Bloomberg grant that was handed out this week.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really excited to be able to go administer more vaccines.
Awesome. I think that's really amazing, because when I was in college, I was pre-med at the time as well. I was working with this physician who was from Kenya, and he also went to Mexico. He learned Spanish, and then he came to the US, went to a rural city where I was from, and he was able to get funding. He got this huge bus, not necessarily van, but it was a bus. He facilitated it with, equipment, and we would travel to the colonias and speak to a lot of potential patients. I mean, most of these people had never even seen a doctor in 5-6 years. There was even one patient where we took his creatine and it was extremely high, and so we instantly took him to the hospital, and they were able to situate that, which is great. But I thought that was also pretty amazing. But that's a very good example as to what you say. The one-on-one is super important, especially if you can speak the language and eloquently explain the situation, or not the situation, but like, the study and how it would benefit them. And so, yeah, I mean, we hope to definitely do that. And we would really love for you to post up the job openings you have. Who knows, one of our members who's bilingual would be able to interview and situate y'all with that particular you could say boundary, right? Would be
Yeah.
great.
I think Morehouse,
You
with the fact that it's private, I think there's a lot of autonomy you guys have that public universities may not get, like the central IRB. I know, especially here in California, I mean, the UC system, they probably don't even know what central IRB means. So you guys definitely have a lot of advantages going for you guys. I know before the pandemic, there was a lot of talk, at least from some of the universities I was dealing with here on the West Coast, the public universities. There was talk about them circumventing this red tape and bureaucracy by partnering with private sites strategically in their communities. This was one of the ways they wanted to increase diversity as well. It doesn't sound like Morehouse needs to do that, but do you guys look into partnerships like that with private sites?
So we do. We have a community provider network. So graduates of Morehouse School of Medicine who stay in the community can join this network. And I'm still acclimating to it, so I don't want to misspeak about it, but it is addressing the local need. Again, it's graduates, so they also know what the goal is. Health equity, culturally congruent coaching is one of Dr. Pimu's programs. She's got a phenomenal TED Talk on it. But yes, so this community provider network is physicians that have graduated and have their own practices, may be involved in research, may just want to refer patients into research. It's a nice network.
Thank you. Yeah, that's comforting to hear. I guess the universities I was dealing with were onto something there, because I think this is more and more common these days.
Yes.
Definitely.
you are
Well,
located in Atlanta, right? Is in Atlanta?
I am, though I am from Fairfield, California.
Oh, and the $1 million question. Do you speak Spanish?
Un poquito.
Well, she has a Mexican background.
but that's honestly also partially why, I mean, we're starting to do Spanish interviews. I missed the first one, but I will be on the next one.
Sí, estaba muy bueno.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I speak Spanish, I understand it 100%, but I speak it a certain amount, right? And I think it's important to acknowledge that there's Spanish speakers and then there's semi-Spanish speakers, and so a good representation of the whole amount of from here to there is important.
End
So
spectrum. End
and
on the
spectrum.
spectrum.
Yeah,
Somewhere in the middle, there I am. Actually, no, I'm more towards the
Spanglish.
non-speaking, but I gotta practice.
Yeah.
The
Yeah,
Spanglish.
the Spanglish. Yes, yes, for sure. But thank you so much, Shanna, for this interview. And honestly, I'm really excited to see, the amount of information and knowledge that's going to be, received from your webinar that we have with you in June. So for those of y'all watching, if you really enjoyed this, please do not miss out on our live monthly webinar, Shanna, in June. I think it's the 8th, but we'll post it up later. But yeah,
Thank you,
thank
Ashley.
you.
Ashley's getting the hang of this. This is
I'm
good.
getting
I
comfortable.
like it. I like it. I was just about to say that, and you said it perfect. And for those that want to get to know Shanna, LinkedIn underneath the video, and get to know her, because in June, it's only coming up in 2 months.
Yeah.
She's going to be the presenter, and we're going to have a lot more to talk about, because this could easily go 3 hours, but we want to be mindful of everyone's
Yeah.
time. So thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Before we finish, her name doesn't sound Latino, but she is Latino.
Yes. Yes. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Shanna. It's
Thank
been
you so
great.
much.
And I look forward to speaking with you again in June.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shanna.